Do you have a straight axle gasser race car and need to put front shocks in, but have no idea where to start or how to do it? Well, neither did I. Let's learn together. What's up, everybody? I'm Jeremy. Welcome back to Speedway Motorsports. This is my 1966 Fairlane gasser project. Now, a while ago, I did a video on kind of doing the steering setup in this, and it got a lot of positive feedback, way more than I was expecting. There's just not a lot of stuff for fabrication on gassers, and I am no expert. Chances are, if you're watching this looking for advice, you're no expert either. So let's help each other. So today, we're actually going to put shocks in this thing. And I thought some people might like to see how I did that too. So come, children, follow along. So here we are down at the business end of the straight axle. Now this is the same Speedway straight axle that a lot of you guys are probably working with. This is the HD one. This car, I'm hoping, goes somewhere in the high 9s, low 10s. So I bought the heavy duty one, so if we come down hard on it, hopefully we don't bend it. Again, pretty standard Willwood disc brakes, no big deal. And now we just got to figure out how to mount a shock set in here in the front. It's important to note here, very similar to the steering video, your car is not going to be the same as mine. So I can't tell you exactly how to do your setup. I don't even know exactly how I'm going to do my setup right now. We're going to figure that out. But you are going to have to show some personal ingenuity on your part to get this done, but it's not that complicated. I've got a couple of tips that'll probably help you out both with like part selection and installation, but don't overthink it. Just kind of get started on it. You'll get there. And worst case scenario, you're just welding mild steel to mild steel probably. If you got to cut it off, cut it off. It's not that big of a deal. First big piece of advice, try to pick shock lengths and ends that equate to a common vehicle. I've seen a lot of, not just gassers, but hot rods in general. I've seen a lot of guys get themselves stuck in a situation where they need a little bitty short shock, and you're really limited to a couple of like Speedway aftermarket shocks that are made for like Model A's. And you just really put yourself in a bind with shock selection, especially if you're trying to go racing and you want something that's going to be adjustable or something like that. So this is a square body C10 shock. It would have been nice if I could have figured out a way to make the top mount a stud mount, like you would find in front shocks in Mustangs, Camaros, etc. Because then you have everything in the world to choose from for front shocks. But the more I thought about it in this, I thought it would be ugly and I thought it would maybe hit the tire and stuff. So I abandoned that idea, but the super common square body C10 has an eyelid on both sides, and you should be able to find a C10 shock in kind of any flavor you want for as big a budget as you want. Now the bottom, the part that goes on the axle, there's not a whole lot to it. It's just a standard shock mount for an axle. I paid, I think, $10 for a set of 2 of them. It's going to go on there. We're going to figure out which kind of angle we want to weld it on, and we're going to just zap it on. This is actually made, and most of them that you find are going to be made for rear axles, which are thicker. So our radius isn't quite right, but this is all mild steel. We can fill a little bit of gap. It'll be fine. The top up here on the frame somewhere is where we're going to have to kind of get cute. Now, for those of you who haven't seen this car in other episodes, first of all, shame on you. You should go watch those. But for those of you who haven't seen it, this is a big ass engine in a little bitty car. This is a 503 cubic inch big block Ford 429 base stroker. There is no finesse here. There's no magic, no supercharger. It is all brute force. If this was a D&D character, this would be a barbarian. No spells. It's just going to hit you in the face with an axe. I have the firewall set back something like an inch, maybe a touch more, and it still barely fits in. So we really don't have a ton of room on the inside to run the shocks. And honestly, you want your shocks as close to your wheels as you can get them anyway. So we're going to put them on the outside of the frame. I could, for sure, at least on this side especially, get a shock in on the front side, but the headers are such nightmares to get in and out in this car. I don't want to limit the amount of space I have to get the angle on the dangle on the header right when I'm trying to install it. So we're going to stick to the outside of the frame rails, which is superior anyway for shock mounting. So we've got some options here. The first and kind of most common thing you would do is just figure out where you're going to put your shock and then take something that ultimately looks like this, whether you do 2 of these together or find one of these that's flat or buy one of these that's meant for an axle and just flatten it out and then just put that guy in there, and you would then have your upper and lower mounts. Similarly, just use 2 of these, mount. And there's tons of other aftermarket brackets. I looked a lot at a bracket set that's made for putting lowering mounts on a square body C10. They would actually mount to the top, but I didn't like the measurement that was going to leave me with as far as shock length. So I'm going to do something a little bit different. This is a simple stud shock mount. This is from Speedway. I actually have an unopened one in my pocket. The part number is 910-36096. You'd also probably get these that come with shocks a lot of the time. It'll be included in the box. I know the rear shocks in my 67 Firebird, when I replace rear shocks, it's come with something like this. The fine thread 3/8 front end and a 1/2 by 20 fine thread 1/2 inch in that is meant to screw into usually like some sort of mount, probably on your spring perch on your rear axle. I also have here a 1/2 by 20 weld-in bung. Bung's kind of a weird word. You call it a weld nut, whatever you want. Moral of the story is this has the same thread as the rear of this. Ultimately, what we're going to do is drill a hole in the frame, stick this through there and weld it in. But because the frame generally on all of these cars, while they're strong because they're boxed, they're pretty thin sheet metal. They're usually about 14 gauge. So we're going to take like some 1/8 steel plate, weld this into that, and then plate that on our frame to make it a little bit stronger. So here, just some 1-inch thick plate. This is some scrap I had laying around. I probably bought this at Lowe's 2 or 3 years ago. Mild steel, it'll work great for what we're doing. And this is probably about twice as thick as the sheet metal that makes up the subframe on this 66 Fairlane here. So we're just going to cut a small piece of it out. Rectangle, we'll see kind of what fits in there. Drill a hole in this, put it through, drill a hole in the frame, so it'll also stick through there. We'll weld this in here, then weld the plate onto the frame, and that'll be our shock mount.
Hey man, how the hell you doing? I've been just fine, living life with the noose, and in my mind, all I hear is music. Watching your mouth move, damn you look stupid. I feel like everyone's a stranger. Small talk with your narcissistic neighbor. She's real hot, but they said to never date her. Ha, I agree, but you did and I hate her. You wanna get away? You better get in line. Won't go another day of wasting any time. I've got a lot to say.
Okay, while we're waiting for that to cool down, let's come back over here to the car and look at kind of how we're going to do this. Both on the axle and then on the frame, I have gone in here and with the flap disc, knocked off all the paint off, so we're welding nice clean metal. I'm not the best welder in the world in the first place, or even like top million best welder in the world. So I want to give myself every advantage I can. We're going to start with clean metal. This is a cheap, I think I paid $35 a piece for these. These are Monroe Gas Magnum, sorry. Ultimately, I'll probably put a more expensive shock on this, and I kind of got led astray by the photo on Amazon because it showed that the top here had an angled body instead of this big straight across. This is a pretty big bodied shock. Now, we have a lip coming off the frame where it's sandwiched together, and that may interfere with this body. We'll see how that's going to turn out, but that's not that big of a deal. I could just notch it just a little bit and make a little oval notch. That wouldn't be that big of a deal, but hopefully we don't have to take that extra step. Second big point I want to talk about, this is a decision you're going to have to make for yourself. Single shear versus double shear. So this is a prime example of double shear. If you have your shock in here with a bolt across, that bolt, in order to shear, would have to shear in 2 places at once. That is a stronger, safer setup. The way we're going to mount our setup, pretend this is the frame, it's going to come through here. This only needs to break in one area to break. That's single shear. There are some people who would tell you to never mount anything really in single shear. But the reality is, again, if we walked over and took a picture of the back of my Firebird, it's going to be mounted just like this in single shear. Here's the important note. This, the way this is working, is a shock assisting a spring. Our spring is independent. It's separately mounted, and that was professionally mounted. I had an actual fabricator do those because I did, number one, I only have a 120 volt welder, and number two, I just didn't trust myself with the spring part of this. I do trust myself with the shock. If you are mounting coilovers where your spring and your shock are together, and whatever mount you have is also supporting the spring action for your axle, that's where I would get a lot more in depth with this, probably mount it double shear. and would kind of not be as rinky-dink with it as we're going to be right here. I mean, we've all driven hot rods with worn out shocks. If you watch the first Disgusting episode of Roadkill, they drove with a broken shock for a ton of miles. Again, it's a shock assisting a spring. It's not a coilover. If you have a broken shock mount while you're going down the road, it's going to mildly inconvenience you. If you have a broken spring mount going down the road or going down a drag strip, it might kill you. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. If you're doing coilovers, if you're doing springs, be a lot more thorough. Maybe thinking about having somebody who's not you do it if you don't feel comfortable with it. Because again, if this breaks, inconvenience. If this breaks, coffin. Keep that in mind. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to weld our lower tab in here. I've just kind of got it zip tied in there. I do have an angle finder that I was using. It's not really important. I've just got it somewhere around 25 degrees. That's more just so I can make sure the other side matches after I get this in. It's not really important other than that right now. This side, I could have gone on either side of the axle. The other side, because it has both the tie rod and the drag link, yeah, I'm really restricted to behind the axle on that. I thought about staggering them, putting this side front, this side back. And if it was a rear axle, I would probably do that. But with the front, we're not worried about wheel hop. I don't think it would matter. So we're going to put them both backwards just so they look symmetrical, and that should be fine. Back, we're drilled in there. I did find out a minor annoyance. These are supposed to be 1/2-inch holes, and they are slightly too small. So that's super irritating. I'm going to have to see if I can find a way to get a drill bit in here. Maybe I can come in from the other side, but that is highly obnoxious. So I'm going to do the other one before I actually weld it in. Anyway, let me see if I can get those holes drilled out. Then we'll mount this guy in there and try to decide where we're going to put that top hole. Oh, I really need a lift to lay on this floor. All right, we're back in here. Shock is just sort of held in with a bolt right now, so we can lean it. Now, shocks are 100% efficient when they're pointed straight up. You can probably see I've got a little white line that I kind of went in here and marked with a marker. I took a homemade plumb bob with a little bitty socket and string. There's an optical illusion at work here because both the car is jacked up, it's a gasser, so the front end is jacked, and this spring runs backwards. But this is straight up and down. So shocks are most efficient at straight up and down, but they're rarely mounted that way. You don't lose a whole lot of efficiency if you keep them under 30 degrees. So we're going to shoot for about a 15-degree angle, and what that does for us is it allows the shock to actually act longer than it is. If your shock's at a touch of an angle, it'll allow your spring to travel more than your shock would allow if it were straight up and down. So 15 degrees. Now again, that mark is more or less straight up and down. That probably on camera, when you compare it to the frame and the spring, looks like it's leaned forward. And I doubt you're going to be able to read this. But see if I can keep the line in place. That's about 0 right in there. 1 degree, 0 degrees. So that's about dead straight up and down. So we want to get it to where about 15 degrees. So something like that. So we have to compress this. But basically, we want it to come down right about dead below where this angle is. Now, this is not the same side to side, so what I'll probably do is I'll mark down, I'll measure across, and then we'll make the other side match however long this distance is. Let's drill the hole. So we've got that in there now. Now I'm just going to tack this in a couple of places, my plate in a couple of places, and then we'll see if we can mount it up and see if it looks good. All right, screwing this in here. Kind of an unintended consequence, but that thing did not want to come out of this top mount. So you can see that's about how much height we would have for when we jack it up and it's just off the ground, or when hopefully we hit the gas and make the wheels lift. Let's make sure we have enough downward travel. AI is going to take your job. Yeah, I'd like to see AI sit here and measure this and mess with it for an hour and a half and still f it up. All right. So not quite as much as I would have liked. We've got a touch more than, we've got about 2 inches down. And we do need to come out some. Wow, a lot more than I thought. Not that much, I guess. So we'll put a couple washers on this because I need to bring this out. But it's got quite a bit of thread on the back. So even if we put 1/4, 3/8 inch of washers on it, it's still gonna be fine. Just has to make sure it doesn't bind is all, which I don't think we will. I actually have to run to the hardware store because I don't have proper length 1/2 inch bolts and stuff. We'll grab some washers, grab some Loctite because I'm out. Okay, we're back, armed with some fresh hardware. So we've got a brand new grade 8 bolt in the bottom of this. On the back of our upper mount here, I've got 3 fat washers behind it. Gives us another like 3/8 of an inch out. So now let's try to install it, see what it looks like. Now this might look like I'm fighting it really hard, like in its binding. That's not really the case. It's just because this bushing fits extraordinarily tight on this stud here. Plus the shock is trying to rebound. I forget which one is which. I think it's rebound. But it's trying to rebound upwards, and that's fighting me as well. I think I've got it on there enough to thread in. Another like really pro tip when you're doing stuff like this, a lot of this type of stuff, like this stud here, or spring shackles, or whatever you're working with, it's probably going to come with some type of lock washer, as it should. However, when you might have to take it on and off a bunch of times while you're trying to fit it, you don't want to do that. It's a big pain in the ass. So we've got just a normal nut on here that we can thread on, and that's going to make our lives a lot easier. All right, let's see how far in this will go and make sure it doesn't bind. Okay, we are pressed up now against the bushing on the other side, and it looks pretty good. It is angled a tiny bit inward. So if you're trying to learn from my mistakes here, make sure you measure in 3 dimensions, not just 2. I really was only thinking about this plane here, but it's nothing to the point where I'm like, oh, this is terrible, it's gonna bind. And again, we could always extend it out a little bit further somehow. I could even try to find, because this is just a screw-in stud, I could try to find a stud that's a touch longer. So we've definitely got options there. But I think that'll play just fine.
Don't forget to check that your tire's clear. I did that off camera.
We're going to call that mission successful. The only thing there is left to do is go in and weld the whole thing in hard where it's just kind of tacked now, and then repeat it on the other side. And really, this did not take me long at all. If I wasn't filming, it probably would have taken like an hour, and then the other side, because I'm just mimicking what I did on this side, will go even faster. So to recap, the kind of 3 important tips. Number 1, try to pick a shock absorber length and end mount set that's going to allow you a lot of options for your shock. Pro tip number 2, pay attention to if you're using a spring assisted shock or like a coilover, where one could really hurt you if it goes sideways and one's going to be a mild inconvenience. Mine was the easier kind, but if you're doing a coilover, take much greater pains to make sure it's not going to fail on you going down the road. And pro tip number 3, buy yourself some regular hardware as opposed to the lock nuts that you'll probably do your final install with, because you don't want to be taking those lock nuts on and off a whole bunch. And if they're nylocks, you've really ruined it if you put it on the first time and then removed it and you have to buy another one. Oh, and an extra pro tip, I said this in my steering video. If you're looking for gasser stuff, if you're looking for straight axle stuff and you're struggling to come up with something, you're trying to get something done, but you can't find any tutorials on it, stop looking for gasser stuff and start looking for straight axle 4x4 stuff, because it's a lot more common to do, and the mechanics really are the same. A lot of the parts that I've used for this come from Barnes 4-wheel drive. So 4x4 stuff, easier to find and really is applicable across. So look for 4x4 tutorials if you're striking out on gasser tutorials. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please like and subscribe. Hopefully this helps you get your straight axle out on the road or the racetrack or both. See you next time.